The air in the forward operating base was thick with the smell of ozone and wet sand, a prelude to the storm that was clawing its way over the serrated peaks of the Hindu Kush. Inside the Tactical Operations Center, the tension was a physical presence, coiling in the guts of every pilot and crew member present. A frantic call had come through a reconnaissance team, pinned down by an early blizzard in a treacherous pass known grimly as the Serpent's Tooth. Their radio was failing, their position compromised. It was a mission that required not just a machine, but a miracle. Major Mark Vance, Calcine Viper, stood at the head of the room, radiating an arrogance as polished as the silver eagles on his collar. He was the squadron's golden boy, the jawline straight from a recruitment poster and a belief in his own superiority that was absolute. He dismissed potential plans with a flick of his wrist, his voice a condescending drawl. The crosswinds are tearing through that valley at 60 knots. It's a meat grinder. Only an ace gets in and out of that. His eyes scanned the room, landing for a brief, dismissive moment on Anya Sharma. She stood near the back, a quiet shadow. In a plain, slightly too large flight suit, her presence was an anomaly in this den of boisterous masculinity. She was smaller, quieter, and she carried herself with a stillness that the others mistook for timidity. Vance saw her and smirked. "Sharma, you're on ground logistics. Make sure the coffee is hot for when we get back." A few sycophantic chuckles rippled through the room. It was a public and deliberate humiliation, a reminder of her place. In his eyes and the eyes of many, a token, a box-ticking exercise in diversity, not a pilot to be taken seriously. Anya's dark eyes, which held the depth of ancient mountains, didn't flare with anger. Her expression remained a placid mask, but inside a familiar cold weight settled. She simply gave a single sharp nod and turned to leave, the laughter of the other pilots following her like a physical blow. She endured it quietly, a ghost in their world of high-speed, high-G bravado. They didn't see the calluses on her hands or the fierce intelligence in her gaze. They saw only what they wanted to see, an outsider. She walked across the windy tarmac, the grit stinging her cheeks. She saw Chief Warrant Officer Eli Jones leaning against the fuselage of a Blackhawk. His weathered face, a roadmap of 100 combat zones. He was older, his hands permanently stained with grease and hydraulic fluid, and he possessed a wisdom that the cocky young pilots lacked. He'd seen Anya's meticulous pre-flight checks, the way she spoke to the mechanics not as underlings but as partners, the way her eyes traced the flight paths of birds in the sky as if learning a secret language. He had seen the truth. He caught her eye and gave a slight tip of his head. "Don't let the peacocks get to you, Sharma. Machine doesn't care what you look like. It only cares how you handle the storm." Anya paused, offering him a small, grateful smile that barely touched her lips. "I know, Chief, thank you." She continued towards the supply hangar. But as she pushed up the sleeve of her flight suit to wipe a smudge of grime from her arm, Eli caught a fleeting glimpse of something extraordinary. A flash of intricate dark ink on her forearm, a pattern of a bird of prey, its wings spread, intertwined with the jagged lines of a mountain range. It was there and gone in a second. A secret whispered to the wind. The narrator's voice begins. Filled with a dramatic, emotional tone, they saw a quiet woman, a checkbox on a roster. They couldn't hear the symphony of aerodynamics in her mind or feel the legacy of courage that ran through her veins. They were about to learn that the most dangerous storms are not the ones in the sky, but the ones you awaken in a silent heart. If you believe that true strength is forged in fire and proven in the face of doubt, then make sure you subscribe and stay with us, because this is a story you will never forget. Weeks bled into one another, each day a new verse in the same song of dismissal. Anya was assigned the milk run's routine cargo transports, 2 well-secured low-risk zones. She flew rations, mail, and non-essential personnel, always under clear skies, always on the safest routes. Major Vance ensured it. He would stride past her in the briefing room, clapping a fellow pilot on the back and saying, just loud enough for her to hear, "All right, boys, let's leave the taxi service to Sharma and go do some real flying." The other pilots, the silent witnesses, would either snicker along or study the floor. Their silence, a form of passive consent. They were cogs in the machine of established hierarchy, unwilling to challenge the status quo for the sake of the quiet woman in the corner. But Anya did not complain. She did not file a grievance. Her resilience was not passive, was active, a quiet sharpening of a blade. She treated every milk run as if it were a life-or-death mission. Her pre-flight inspections were so thorough that the ground crews began using her checklists as the new standard. CWO Eli Jones watched it all. He saw her in the mess hall, not reading magazines or playing cards, but studying topographical maps of the most hostile territories in the province, her finger tracing ridges and valleys as if she were touching the face of a lover. He saw her after her shifts, not at the makeshift bar with the others, but in the flight simulator, the lights of the console reflecting in her focused eyes. She wasn't just flying, she was mastering the impossible. She practiced in simulated whiteout conditions, in catastrophic engine failures over jagged peaks, and in the swirling, deadly wind shears of the Serpent's Tooth. She was preparing for a storm that only she seemed to know was coming. The storm arrived on a Tuesday. It was a meteorological demon, a tempest of such sudden and raw fury that it made the previous squall look like a summer shower. It descended upon the highest peaks, a swirling vortex of snow and ice. In the heart of that vortex, trapped in the unforgiving embrace of the Widow's Peak, was a Tier 1 Special Operations team. Their mission was classified, their situation dire. Their beacon was fading, and their last transmission was a broken plea for an impossible extraction. News hit the base like a shockwave. This wasn't just a team. This was a group of legends, the tip of the spear. And to make matters worse, their commanding officer, the man who had personally overseen their deployment, was en route to the base. General Thomas Caldwell, the name itself commanded respect. He was a living legend, a 3-star general known for his icy calm in the heat of battle and his utter intolerance for incompetence. His arrival sent a current of panic through the command staff. Once, for the first time, looked less like a golden boy and more like a man facing a firing squad. The fate of those soldiers rested on his squadron, and he knew with a dawning, sickening certainty that the storm had rendered them all impotent. When General Caldwell's helicopter landed, he didn't walk from the tarmac. He marched his face, a mask of controlled fury, the wind whipping at his coat. He strode into the operations center, his presence sucking the air out of the room. He didn't want excuses. He wanted solutions. He wanted his men back. The briefing room was a pressure cooker. The digital map on the main screen showed a furious, swirling red mass engulfing the Widow's Peak. A weather specialist, a young lieutenant with sweat beading on his brow, stammered through the forecast. "General, the wind shear is. It's off the charts. Any aircraft entering that zone would be torn apart. There are no viable flight paths." Major Vance, trying to project an image of command he did not feel, stepped forward. He outlined a plan. A desperate, suicidal, direct approach that he knew was futile. General Caldwell listened, his eyes like chips of granite. He didn't even let Vance finish. "Major, you are suggesting I send my pilots into a blender? That is not a plan. It is a death sentence. Does anyone in this room have anything other than a suicide pact to offer me?" An unnerving silence fell. The aces of the squadron, the men who had laughed at Anya's expense, now stared at their boots. The best among them, seasoned pilots with thousands of hours, shook their heads. "It's a no-fly, General," one finally mumbled. "A flying coffin up there." Into that void of fear and resignation, a single voice, calm and measured, cut through. "The tension, General? I can do it." Every head turned. Anya Sharma had stepped out from the shadows of the back wall. She stood, not with arrogance, but with a profound and unshakable certainty. Vance's face contorted in a sneer of disbelief and fury. "You," he spat, his voice dripping with venom. "You've never even seen real combat. You fly glorified school buses. This is the big leagues, Sharma. Sit down before you embarrass yourself." And this entire squadron? Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. It was absurd. It was insulting. But Anya's gaze did not waver. She ignored Vance completely, her eyes locked on the general. She moved to the map, her movements economical and precise. Her sleeve, damp from the rain outside, rode up her forearm. As she pointed, fully and clearly revealing the tattoo that Eli Jones had glimpsed weeks before, the stylized kestrel, its wings intertwined with a specific, jagged mountain range. "You cannot fly against this storm, General," she said, her voice resonating with an authority no one had ever heard from her before. "You have to fly with it." The updrafts in the kestrel corridor on the western face of the peak are violent, but they're cyclical. They create a pocket, a wave of calm air. It only lasts for 30 seconds, maybe less, but it's a window.
General.
Caldwell, who had been studying the map with grim intensity, froze. His eyes, sharp and analytical, dropped from the red swirls on the screen to the dark ink on her arm. His stern expression dissolved, replaced by a wave of stunned, raw disbelief. He walked toward her, moving as if in a dream, the rest of the room ceasing to exist. He slowly raised a hand and pointed a single, trembling finger at the tattoo. "That emblem," he whispered, his voice hoarse, "the Kestrel Brotherhood. There were only a dozen of them. Where did you get that?" Vance, seeing his authority evaporate, tried to interject. "General, with all due respect, this is a complete waste of our time." "She's—" General Caldwell silenced him with a single, devastating glare, a look that conveyed a universe of contempt. He turned back to Anya, his eyes searching her face. "Tell me," he commanded softly. Anya's voice dropped, but it carried to every corner of the now silent room. "My father was my instructor. He flew these mountains for 30 years. He pioneered the high-altitude, extreme weather rescue program. For the local forces." Her throat tightened, but she pushed on. "He called me his little kestrel." The general's face softened, the hard lines of command giving way to a flood of memory and pain. Ravi Sharma was your father," he breathed. "He pulled my team out of that same valley 12 years ago. In a storm just like this one, he taught me about that maneuver. He called it riding the kestrel's wave." He looked from her, face to the tattoo, and back again, finally understanding. "He gave this tattoo to his protégés. There were only a dozen of them. Where did you get that?" Vance, seeing his authority evaporate, tried to interject. "General, with all due respect, this is a complete waste of our time." "She's—" General Caldwell silenced him with a single, devastating glare, a look that conveyed a universe of contempt. He turned back to Anya, his eyes searching her face. "Tell me," he commanded softly. Anya's voice dropped, but it carried to every corner of the now silent room. "My father was my instructor. He flew these mountains for 30 years, pioneered the high-altitude, extreme weather rescue program. For the local forces." Her throat tightened, but she pushed on. "He called me his little kestrel." The general's face softened, the hard lines of command giving way to a flood of memory and pain. Ravi Sharma was your father," he breathed. "He pulled my team out of that same valley 12 years ago. In a storm just like this one, he taught me about that maneuver. He called it riding the kestrel's wave." He looked from her, face to the tattoo, and back again, finally understanding. "He gave this tattoo to his protégés, the only ones who could master the wave." A heavy silence hung in the air, thick with the weight of revelation. General Caldwell looked at the stunned, clueless faces of Vance and the other pilots. He then looked back at Anya, not as a subordinate, but as an equal, as the heir to a sacred legacy. "This isn't just a pilot," he announced to the room, his voice booming with emotion and newfound conviction. "This is royalty." The general's declaration shattered the room's atmosphere. The quiet hum of computer fans seemed deafening in the wake of his words. The looks of scorn and derision on the faces of the other pilots had melted away, replaced by a mixture of shock, awe, and a creeping, profound shame. Major Vance stood as if frozen, his face ashen. The entire foundation of his superiority, built on prejudice and arrogance, had been pulverized in a single moment. He wasn't just wrong, he was a fool. And he had been made a fool in front of the one man whose respect he craved above all others. General Caldwell's gaze fell upon him, cold and hard as steel. "Major Vance," he said, his voice dangerously level, "you will have the honor of serving as Chief Sharma's co-pilot on this mission." He let the new title hang in the air, a deliberate and final validation of Anya's status. You will check her aircraft personally, you will sit in the right seat, you will operate the comms, you will follow her every single command to the absolute letter. Is that understood? Vance, stripped of his swagger, could only manage a choked, humiliated "yes, sir." His world had been turned upside down. He was no longer the ace, he was the baggage. The flight into the storm was a symphony of controlled chaos. Where other pilots saw only a maelstrom, Anya saw a pattern, a rhythm. Her hands on the cyclic and collective were not tense but fluid, moving with an innate understanding of the air. She didn't fight the hurricane-force winds. She danced with them, using their violent energy to lift and guide the Blackhawk. In the co-pilot's seat, Vance was a statue of terrified reverence. He watched as she navigated through canyons of swirling snow with a calm that defied reason. He saw the instruments scream warnings that should have meant certain death. Yet she held the aircraft steady, her eyes fixed on some point in the whiteout that only she could see. Then came the moment of truth. As they approached the western face of Widow's Peak, she spoke, her voice clear over the intercom. "Here it comes. Get ready." She nosed the helicopter into what felt like a solid wall of wind, a force that should have smashed them into the mountainside. Vance gripped his seat, his knuckles white, bracing for impact. But then the miracle happened. Just as she had predicted, a pocket of surreal calm opened before them. Kestrel's wave. For a breathtaking 20 seconds, the world outside was serene, the snow falling gently as if in a snow globe. Below them, huddled behind a rock formation, were the stranded soldiers. The crew chief and medic worked with frantic precision, winching the half-frozen men aboard. As the last man was secured, the wave began to collapse. "Hold on," Anya yelled, and plunged the Blackhawk out of the corridor just as the comm imploded, back into a vortex of fury. The return journey was just as harrowing, but inside the cockpit, the atmosphere had changed forever. When the skids of the Blackhawk finally touched down on the tarmac, it seemed the entire base was waiting. They stood not in a loose crowd, but in a silent, respectful formation. Anya, exhausted but resolute, unstrapped herself and stepped. Out of the cockpit, General Caldwell strode forward. In a gesture that sent a ripple of astonishment through the crowd, he snapped to attention and rendered a sharp, perfect salute. One by one, from the lowest-ranking private to the colonels on the command staff, every single person on that tarmac followed his lead.
Ow.
They saluted the quiet woman they had dismissed, the pilot they had scorned. In the quiet aftermath, as the rescued soldiers were being rushed to the medical bay, Vance approached Anya. His face, usually a mask of smug superiority, was stripped bare, showing only a raw, humbling shame. Sharma. He started, then corrected himself. "Chief Anya, what I did, how I treated you. There are no words. I was wrong, blind." Anya looked at him, her eyes not filled with triumph or malice, but with a weary wisdom. "We all have blind spots, Major," she said, her voice soft but firm. "Just be a better pilot, and a better man. That's all that matters." The narrator's voice returns, filled with a heartwarming and inspirational tone. Anya Sharma did not seek revenge or glory. She sought only to do her duty, to honor the legacy of the man who taught her to fly. In rescuing those soldiers, she rescued the honor of the squadron itself, forcing them to see beyond their prejudices. She taught them that true worth is not loud or boastful. It is quiet, it is resilient, and it is proven not with words, but with deeds. The base was never the same. A few weeks later, a small, stylized kestrel, expertly painted, appeared on the nose of her Blackhawk, a permanent mark. Of respect, a symbol of the day, a quiet woman taught a squadron of aces how to truly fly.